Homebuyer seminar hosted by Bond Street and the Weber Stern Group at Keller Williams. My name is Kelly Weber, and I am the founder of the Weber Stern Group here at Keller Williams. This is Vinnie Giordano. Said that right? Yep. Okay. Lender at Bond Street.
Yep, sure. I'm one of the vice presidents at Bond Street Mortgage. We're an in-house mortgage lender in Paramus, New Jersey. We can help you with all financing. We'll get into some of the pre-approval stuff later on and some of the programs that we offer you guys.
And we also invited Joe Mecca, who is a real estate attorney here in Paramus, to go over that process. And Paul Ryan is a home inspector, and he'll give you some ideas of what to expect during the home inspection process. So you want to get started?
Sure. So we wanted to start with a couple of the topics that we're going to be talking about today. The first thing we're going to be talking about is the pre-approval process. What we want to do today is educate you guys on the whole process from beginning to end. So you have a clear picture of what you're going to need to do throughout the whole process until you actually buy this home. Okay. So at the end of this, we're going to open it up to question and answer. So any questions that you guys have, leave them until the end. We definitely will answer those for you. Okay. So we're going to start with the pre-approval process. And what is it? So pre-approval is a predetermination to qualify you for a loan and the maximum amount that you're going to qualify for based upon looking at your income, your assets, and your credit. Okay. Why is that important? It allows you to establish a housing budget for yourself to know how much you could spend per month on a mortgage. Allows you to identify and correct any problems that you might have before actually applying for a mortgage. Better understand your financing options so you know if you want to go with a fixed program, an ARM, what interest rate you're going to qualify for. And sellers are going to take you more serious when you actually put in an offer with a pre-approval. Okay.
Sure. And that really is, as a realtor, that is what we ask you for before taking you out to see homes, because we don't want you in a price range that is either too low and you find that you're getting very disappointed in what you're seeing, and we also don't want you looking too high, because then if that's too high for where you can afford, nothing will meet up to nothing will be it won't be what you think. So we, as realtors, we always make sure that you have a pre-approval first.
Yeah. Typically speaking, a seller's, there's going to be other offers on properties, and so a seller is going to look at those offers before yours if there's no pre-approval. Okay. So the question is, how do you get pre-approved, right? So we start with an initial conversation just to go over your goals and your plan to find out a little bit more about yourself and what you're looking to do as far as buying a home. We fill out an application. Okay, there's no charge to fill out the application. We're just taking basic information down to see, your overall picture. We're submitting income and asset documents, which we'll talk about what we're going to be submitting later on, and we're going to pull your credit to see where your credit scores. Okay. So moving on to the next slide, income documents. So if you look up here, you'll see the income documents that we're going to request at the start of this process, and it's going to be a month of your most recent pay stubs, your last 2 years of W-2s, and your last 2 years of your federal tax return. Okay, so you want to make sure when you're submitting those tax returns, it's all pages of the tax return. Okay. In addition to the income documents, we're going to look at your asset documents as well. So as far as assets are concerned, you're going to submit your bank statements or any type of asset that you have, retirement account, stocks, investments, the last 2 months. For those documents, we also want to see all pages of the document. Okay. Sometimes people ask, back pages are nothing on there. If it says 1 of 7, we need to see all 7 pages. Okay. And so income and employment. So why are we looking at these income documents? What do we want to see from them? So we need to look at them to see how you're paid. Are you hourly? Are you salary? Are you getting a bonus? Is there any commission? Has your income declined from the previous year? All of that's important to make a determination if you can repay this loan. That's important for you because you want to make sure that nothing's going to happen later on in life where you can't make a payment on this mortgage. Okay. What do the tax returns show? So the reason we want to see the tax returns is because are you writing anything off from your employment? Do you have a small business that you might show in your tax returns that's showing a loss? Do you own any other properties? Is there income on those properties? So that's what we're looking at. And also employment history. So Has the work history been steady over the last 2 years? Have you been jumping around to a couple of different jobs? All of this is okay, and we're going to come up with the right plan, but we want to know that up front so that you don't hit any snags down the road. Okay. And so assets. Most importantly, we want to know where the money's coming from for the down payment and closing costs. So will you be getting a gift? Is it coming from your checking and savings accounts? Is it coming from retirement accounts? Are there any large deposits into your accounts? Most people don't know this, but because of the Patriot Act and money laundering purposes, we need to look and see where money's coming from. So if there's large deposits coming into your account, you actually have to source that. So you want to know that up front, okay? Is any money coming out of retirement account? You can take money out of retirement account as a first-time home buyer, no penalty to do that, but sometimes you have to pay yourself back. So we want to make sure that if you're doing that, we know how much you're going to be paying yourself back and equate that into what's called the debt to income ratio. Okay. And how much will you have in reserves? Typically speaking, you don't want to leave somebody with no money in the bank after they're buying a house. If you do, and something happens, you're not really setting them up for success. You want to make sure that there's some money there left over after. Okay. And there's different programs for this. And credit. So credit, we're looking at the type of debt that's showing up in the credit report. When we pull your credit, student loans, are they deferred? Are you going to be paying them back over the next, 6 months, a year, 3 years down the line? Auto loans, credit cards, and mortgages. Okay, we want to see the payment history. So, are there any lates on the credit report? Anything like that? We want to make sure that it's clean and everything is happening. Okay. Derogatory credit. A lot of times this comes into play. People don't realize it, but they can have a small collection bill from Verizon, something like that they're unaware of, and it could affect their credit scores negatively. During this process, we want to see if there's anything negative showing up on the credit report that we can help repair at that time, get those credit scores higher, and help them purchase a home. Okay. And how many inquiries are you having? So if there's multiple inquiries, that can lower the credit scores as well. So we want to make sure that that's something that's we're seeing up front. Okay. And so some programs that we have. Okay, so just to talk about that real quick, we have first-time home buyer programs with grants available. Some of these programs allow as little as 3% down. Some of them allow 100% financing. Okay, we do all types of programs: conventional, VA loans for veterans, FHA loans, jumbo loans. We have no closing cost options as well, and renovation loans too. Okay, so if you're looking to buy a house that may need some work to it, you can actually finance that throughout the whole process. Okay. And after this pre-approval process, once we pre-approve you guys, we're going to hand you a pre-approval letter, and at that point, you're going to be able to be handed off to Kelly so that she can do her part.
So once you have that pre-approval in hand, what we like to do is we like you to come in and sit down with us and have a buyer's consult. We want to go over with you what towns you're looking in, what's your price range, what are your must-haves, what are your you don't necessarily need to have, and we're going to set you up on listing alerts on our New Jersey MLS. I'm just going to talk a little bit about misconceptions with Zillow and Realtor.com and all the internet sites that are out there. While they're a great tool, the information there is not always correct. Most of the time, the estimates are not correct either. So it's really good to be working with a realtor because number one, you have somebody who's advocating for you. You have somebody that knows the market and has the information as it's being put on, put out there for sale. So with these listing alerts that we set you up on, as soon as a house comes on the market in the neighborhoods that you're looking in, you'll automatically get an email and go to a page where you're able to go through and hit like, dislike, my favorites, and we can communicate on that on that page as well. So once we decide where you're looking and you see homes that you like, we take you out and we start looking for homes. Sorry, I have to put my glasses on. I can't see. We recommend when we go out looking for homes, everybody wants to spend a whole day out looking. We technically like to do no more than 6 homes. Trust me, when you're out looking at homes, everything starts rolling together. Did this one have a fireplace? Did that one not have the garage? So we try to limit it to 6 homes and we try to set it up per town. what to expect from your agent when you're in a home. My team, all my agents that work with me, they're trained to go in and point out everything in the house, the flaws, the positives. What I really feel is important, let's point out what kind of electrical panel do you have? Is it updated? Is it 100 amp, 150, 200? How old is the hot water heater? How old do you think the furnace is? Do we have a sump pump? Do you have French drains? All of this will come into play when you find a house that you like and you want to put an offer in. We want to make sure that you're fully aware of what the house has, both positive and negative, before you put an offer in. In saying that, I also ask for a property seller's disclosure. That'll give you additional information on the house. Because representing you, the buyer, I want to make sure you have all the information that you need to make an informed decision on price. On price. We also go back and we do comparables, which most agents do when they're listing a home. I do it and my team does it when we're putting an offer in, because we want to make sure you're in the right range. We don't want you overpaying for a house. So we offer that as well. Most weekends, we're doing our own open houses. So what we do is on a Thursday, Friday, we'll start getting together the open houses that are in your areas, give you our business cards, and let you go out and look as well. Most of the agents will be there to accommodate you and show you the house on our behalf. What happens when you find a home? One more. Yeah. Okay. So what happens when we find a home? I touched base on a few minutes ago. We do what's called the CMA. It's a customer market analysis. We pull everything that is sold in the last 6 months, because that's what an appraiser is going to be looking at, and we come up with a price. And that's what we decide to do when we go in. We'll go in with an offer. Very seldom will I say you need to offer full price on a house. But when I do, you really need to listen, because the homes now are flying, and that's why it's so important to be pre-approved first and working with a realtor who will advocate for you. We'll pull the seller's disclosure again. I just talked about it. It's a document that each homeowner, each seller has to fill out when listing their house. I like to look at the items that are included and excluded. Is the refrigerator staying? Are the washer dryers staying? What about the nice window treatments? Those are all things we take into consideration too when making an offer. Purchase price again, an appraiser is going to come in and appraise that house. So if you paid $500 for that house and the house is only worth $450, you're not going to get a mortgage. So that's another reason why it's important to do a market analysis before putting an offer in. So when your offer is accepted, where do we go from there? We go into what's called attorney review. And that's a 3 to 5 day process where we get the document signed by both you and the seller. You agree on a price, you agree on the terms, and then you get a lawyer, and that's when Joe Mecca comes in. The agent, myself, the seller's agent or the buyer's agent, will send all the documentation over to both attorneys, and Joe will tell you the whole attorney review process.
So when I get a new contract in from a realtor, it's very important to communicate with the client right away, especially in the seller's market, because there may be multiple offers, and it's important to get started immediately. So I'll contact the buyer, introduce myself, sometimes even introduce the staff. The contracts are standard realtors forms of contracts. I've seen them 1,000 times. However, within the contracts, there may be changes that have been made by the seller. I want to make sure that we go over all aspects of the contract. A lot of boilerplate in there, but you have to be careful about the wording. Having seen these contracts, numerous times, I know what to look for in the contracts that you as a buyer need to be aware of. And it's also important to have a relationship with the client right away, so that they feel, okay, I can trust Mr. Mecca in his office to get back to me and then to get in touch with the other attorney that way. Sometimes I'll know the other attorney. I've been doing this for 30 years. So a lot of times the real estate attorneys in this area know each other. I'll call up the other attorney and say, hey, I'm on the other side of this deal. Gives them a level of comfort because they know, okay, I know what I'm doing, and we've worked together before. And sometimes that actually helps the deal move forward on your behalf. Because if there's two equal offers and the other attorney knows me and says, okay, I know this attorney is good to work with, they may go with that, with their offer. So the key is communication. And Kelly will tell us that's why I'm recommended, because we communicate very well. I'll communicate with her. I'll communicate with the mortgage people as soon as we get involved with that process. If there's anything I can do on my end, it's all about client contact.
Absolutely. So once the attorney review, you sit down with the attorney, go over the seller and seller's attorney and the buyer's attorney speak. We come out of attorney review. Again, that's a 3 to 5 day process. Then you go under contract. When you go under contract on a home, number one, the seller can't show the house anymore. So that house right now is off the market and it's yours. We want to make sure that home is solid and sound. So you do a home inspection on it. And we invited Paul Ryan here, who's a home inspector, to give you some, tips on or things that we look for in a home inspection.
Okay, at this point, Mr. Mecca, pick up where you left off. Communication is very important. When I show up to do the inspection on the stuff that you want to buy, a few bullet points. I'm going to take a pen and pencil and follow me around, or follow the inspector around, and ask questions as you go through the inspection. A home inspector has a limited time. They can't be there all day, so they like to work in a clockwise motion or a reverse motion and go through the whole house, outside and inside of all 3 floors, the attic and the basement. My job is to find defects in the systems and components in your house. Look at the basement floor, the walls, the foundation, the ceiling. Go to the first floor, check the bathroom sinks, counters, everything from the basement floor to keep it roof. And I'm looking to find defects, and I look at this house as though I want to buy it. That's what you're hiring me for. When you hire me, I work strictly for you, represent you. So everything I do is for you. I don't work for the realtors and the attorneys all over the team. And at that point, when the inspection's done, within 3 to 5 business days, I put a report together. I usually have about 250 to 300 pictures. I put it in a report with all my findings. I send an email to you. Email a copy to the lawyer and to the realtor so they can see it also. And at that point, I step out from there, and now it's up to you to go back to the negotiation table with the report, with the lawyers, and they take it from there.
I'll just say one thing about
Sure.
a good inspector is not only someone who does a good inspection, but also who writes a good report. Because being able to communicate, what the defects are is very important. I've dealt with inspectors who are really good at inspecting, but not so good at the wording part, and that could be a problem. Paul does both, and having pictures and being able to explain. If there's a question, I don't go on the inspection, so I don't know what's going on. I just see pictures. But if we have a question, I'll call them and say, could you explain this further or maybe just clarify? But making sure that you communicate it to the inspector, if any issues right away is very important as well.
And one thing Paul will do, because I'll follow him around, is this really a problem? Is this something that they should be worried about? Or is this a 5 to 10 year, a lot of times he'll just give you information to say, hey, listen, in about 5 to 10 years, you may start to 5 to 10, I know that's a big span, but 5 to 7 years, you may need to start looking at your roof, or there are things he's going to give you for information purposes only. And then there are also things that he's going to say, this needs to be done. This is a problem. And myself as a realtor, I'm with my buyers throughout the home inspection, because I want to know exactly what the problem is, because I want to be able to advocate for you, the buyer. So usually the inspector is very happy and the buyers are very happy for us to communicate. So say we come up with a few problems. So we go back to the table again with the attorney. Termites. If you have termites in your house, you can't get a mortgage without that being taken care of. So we know the seller has to take care of that. And there are other things that the seller, let's say a furnace is cracked, or the roof is old but it's still functioning. you can sit down with your attorney and go through that list of inspection concerns and go through with him, and you'll advise them what you feel should be addressed, what you feel should, and the attorneys will negotiate back and forth to come up with solution of whether they're going to give you a credit, whether they're going to do a repair.
Yeah, we try to work through the inspection report. First thing I do is contact the client. I ask them to look, make sure they looked at the report before we sit down or we talk about it, so that they're familiar with what's there. I've seen, again, lots of these reports. So certain things that you see, I probably see them in every report. Cracks in the driveway, certain cosmetic things that if you're a first-time home buyer, you say, well, should I be concerned about that? I'm able to tell you, okay, you should be concerned or you shouldn't be concerned based upon my experience. Again, I haven't seen the house, but I'm able to tell you, I think this is what you should be focusing on other than some maybe cosmetic things. And again, it really also depends on a couple of things. Number one is, okay, are there other people out there that are waiting in the wings? If you don't take this house, they're going to want the house. I don't want you to be too concerned about that, but that is sometimes an issue. Also is, are you a do-it-yourselfer? If you're not, then maybe certain things you should be concerned about where someone else who's, capable of doing things. And I need to know from the client, whether or not, okay, I'm okay with that. I can take care of that. I've seen that before. Usually first-time home buyers, I tell you the same thing. You're buying a used car. Not everything is going to be perfect, but you need to focus on the things that are important that might be costly in the future. And again, it's sometimes you want a credit because you want to do it yourself after closing. And sometimes you want them to take care of it. Give you an example, mold. Mold's a big issue now, okay? A lot of houses, or not a lot, but certain houses have mold. Mold may be something you need to be very concerned with. It may be something that you don't need to be concerned with at all. If I see something that Paul says, look, I don't know what type of mold that is, I'll tell you, get a mold person in, okay? There's certain other things like chimney inspections. If it's an older chimney, we'll say, look, you might want to get a separate inspection done after the first inspection by the home inspector. So things like that you need to look for. I'll help you through.
And those are big ticket items as a first-time home buyer that I feel representing the buyer that the seller really should be, taken care of. And a lot of times now, and I'll go into the certificate of occupancy before I go back to you, a lot of times a chimney inspection is required with the towns for what's called a certificate of occupancy. Anytime a house turns over, the towns require this, it's really on the seller to go through and have smoke and carbon, fire extinguishers, handrails on all the stairs. Now they're requiring chimney certifications. So again, that we're finding that's now going back to the seller.
Yeah, so that's called a level 2 chimney inspection. It's going to become mandatory, I believe, too. Have a fireplace in the chimney inspected before you start a fire in there for your own protection. And it's also important, as Kelly and Joe said, read the inspection report thoroughly, so that when you sit down with the attorney and the realtor, you know what you're looking at, you know what you're talking about. There's no confusion. But if there is any questions, you always call the home inspector, ask questions if you have them, or refer to Kelly or the attorney for those questions.
So we get through the home inspection. I'm going to go back to you because what we also do is the home needs to be appraised. So by your mortgage company, and they'll send an appraiser out to come in.
Yeah, so the next steps, once you're an attorney review, or during that time period, I should say, once the offer is accepted, we're going to be sending you out. Actually, I want to stop right there and just talk about one other thing. So when we're talking about the credits, real quick, just so that you know, that credit that you're going to get back can be applied towards really two separate things. Joe, you know, to tell me better. The purchase price, to lower that purchase price, or towards closing costs, which we see more often than not. But that's going to allow you to come to the closing with less money that you would have expected. And then you're going to use that money basically afterwards to make the repairs and what have you. Your handyman, you want to do stuff, you can. So that's how that works, okay, as far as the credits are concerned. Going back to this now, as far as the mortgage process is concerned, you have an offer accepted. The next step is putting together the loan application. Okay, so we're actually going to put together the loan application, disclose to you all the different disclosures that are for your benefit, the closing cost estimates, things like that. You guys are going to sign the full disclosure, okay, and send it back to us. It's going to go into processing at that point in time, where our process is going to review all of the closing cost documents, all of the loan documents, and all of the income documents that you have submitted, make sure that everything is in expired, and they'll ask for any particular document that they need to update throughout the process. And they're going to prep it to get ready to go into underwriting, okay? Now, typically speaking, what we like to do is wait for the inspection to be done to order the appraisal, to make sure that there's no issue that this house may fall through for the rest, okay? Because if it falls through, we don't want you spending money on an appraisal that ultimately, it's going to be a loss of money for you. That inspection is a very key part of this whole process to make sure that everything is okay with the house itself, okay? As we have everything and we make sure that everything is okay with the inspection and everything is okay with processing, we're going to move it into underwriting, okay? So that's the third step on there that you can see, and you actually have this pamphlet in the folder. It's on the back side of it. The underwriter is going to review everything that me and the processor have looked at already to come up with your income, your assets, things like that. And they're the final say to say, okay, we agree with the income that you've come up with. We agree that the assets are okay. The contract is okay. Everything is in line with what's needed for this house. And what they're going to do is issue a conditional approval, okay? So that conditional approval is going to state certain things that they need. The title insurance, okay, which Joe's going to handle. Joe handles the title insurance aspect. Your homeowner's insurance, okay? You're going to need to get a homeowner's insurance policy on the property to make sure if anything ever happened, you're insured. Anything else that may not have been done at that time, let's say putting a down payment down on the property up front, sometimes the seller's going to want you to put some money down before actually closing. They're going to need to see that money, things like that, okay? So the next part of this is getting all of those documents that the underwriter's asking for. So you can go back to Joe. He's going to get the title insurance. You're going to get the homeowner's insurance, appraisal, things like that are going to come in. We're going to gather all that information together, resubmit it back to the underwriter. As long as everything's there, the underwriter is going to come back, tell us we're good to go. You guys can go to the closing table, purchase the home, and the next step is actually funding that and signing the documents. So you'll go to Joe's office, sit down, he'll go through all the documents with you, make sure that you understand fully the disclosures. I don't know, Joe, if you have any part of that you want to talk about.
Yeah, so closing takes place at the buyer's attorney's office typically. Title agent is there at the closing. I review the title binder when it comes in to make sure everything is the way it should be. The closing usually takes about an hour. It takes longer than an hour if something's wrong, quite frankly, because everything should be done in advance. I mean, all of the paperwork should be done, should be reviewed. And the hour is basically explaining the documentation to the buyer. And working with like Bond Street, I understand their packages, and it's somewhat easier for me when I deal with the lender that I'm familiar with in a title company. So there's a relationship there. So yeah, that's the last step. There is a walkthrough, and Kelly can talk about the walkthrough before the closing, because that's usually the last little
Yeah,
glitch.
that's the last stop. Usually a week before the closing, I'll send a reminder out to call PSE&G, cable, water company, and have everything put into your name, or at least give them the date of when you're going to take possession of the house. And then the day of the closing, we'll meet you at the home and we do a walkthrough. We look to see that any repairs that we requested were done. We look to make sure the home is in the same condition that we saw in, obviously without the personal belongings. And we make sure that there's nothing wrong with it. So when you sign that paper, it's your home, and you want it to be free and clear with no issues. And then from there, we head over to the closing, and Joe just explained the closing process. I would suggest for the closing to bring a bottle of Advil, because your wrists are going to hurt from signing all the papers, but that's it in a nutshell. I mean, it seems like a lot of information, but with people like us, it goes along nice and smooth.
Yeah, we definitely Yeah, we definitely educate you and hold your hand throughout the whole process so that you feel comfortable through every step. You're understanding it and not just getting pushed along through it. Each one of us, I feel, when we do work together, that's the level of service that we want to provide to the clients so that you guys fully aware of everything. So that's why we wanted to go over this, just to give you a big overview of the whole process. We really wanted to open up for question and answers to you guys as well. I don't know if there's any questions first, but
I'm good. Yeah, I mean, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer anything. And it seemed, we went through it rather quickly and it's overwhelming, so if you,
There's no silly questions.
yeah, there are none.
Yeah, it's a big investment for a first-time home buyer, so ask questions.
Okay, I have a question. So I was telling you that I couldn't find any, like the grants that you can get.
Mhm.
And I asked the realtor, I went to the town that I live in because that's where I want to buy a house. And I went to town hall and they sent me from this office to that office and nobody could find any. So I found it online. Who actually, do you help me with that? Who do I get help with in filling out the paperwork for the grants?
I'm not familiar with grants.
Grant, like a first-time home buyers.
Down payment assistant grant.
Down payments, there
Closing
was
costs.
8 different ones for Bergen County. One was Sandy, so that's out, but the other ones were, one allows you to get a mortgage and you get 25% for repairs in that mortgage. So I really, you know what, I can show you on my phone what they are,
Mhm.
but.
we do have grant programs available, okay? And so how the grants work is it's covering a portion of the down payment that you would be putting down on the property, okay? It is specific to usually address, okay, of the property that you're looking to buy and the qualifications of you. So that's really how we go about it. We get all of your documents in, review everything, make sure that we qualify, and then we send it out to see if the grant is going to, acceptable.
So-
That's after you find a house. You
Well,
have to
as
find
you
the property.
before we actually put a pre-approval in, we're gonna check to see if that specific address will qualify for the grant. So,
And the short answer is the mortgage company will typically help you with the grant paperwork, because we do like to see that up front. So we make sure that it can work in unison with the type of financing that you would get
Right.
from the mortgage
Because
company.
each one is so different. One
Yep.
gives you up to $50,000.
Exactly.
And one does something, so that.
Usually all the state grants and county, assistance is acceptable type of grants for mortgage financing. So Vince can definitely sit down with you and go over the list for Bergen County.
In your case, how much is an inspection? Depending on the house or how
Every
many
home
family?
inspector, there's no law regulating that, but each home inspector does it differently. I do it based on the size of the house. The bigger the house, the more time I spend there, of course, the more expensive it would be. And typically, it's between $300 and $500, depending on how many bedrooms and how many bathrooms. Is there a crawl space? Is there a barn or a garage attached to it? Everything depends on the size and number of rooms. But the typical house, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, about 400. And ancillary is, an insect inspection is a separate service. It's an ancillary service, that's between 50 and 75. And a radon inspection, was the EPA recommends you do, 150. So there's two
And you
separate-
do you sell all of those or? Okay.
And it's the best money you're ever gonna spend.
Yes, sure.
If you're spending that much.
That and the lawyer fees, you have to pay upfront,
No.
and that has nothing to do with the mortgage? How does that work?
I get paid at closing. It's a 10-year agreement and I get paid at the closing.
Home inspector gets paid when they show up to do the inspection.
And the other inspection, the other inspection they want to do, they're not sure regarding whether it's an underground tank on the property. You want to have a tank scanned out. That's typically about $200, $250. Basically, a guy going out with a big metal detector around the ground, to make sure there's no large tank
You
in the
mean, you
ground.
mean like an oil tank?
An oil
Yes.
tank.
Right.
Yeah. It used to be years ago, they would abandon the tanks in place. They'd clean them out, fill them with sand and leave them there. And that was the protocol, and it was fine, you get a certificate, abandonment is done. That's no longer the case. Now, lenders, insurance companies, homeowner insurance companies want those tanks out of the ground. So if you're a buyer, there's a tank under the ground and the seller says, oh, it was fine. When I bought it, I had the certificate that said it was abandoned in place. I'm usually telling the client, you want that tank out.
Most deals that happens to, I mean, it has to come out. We even tell our sellers if they have a decommissioned tank, you know, and the paperwork, like Joe just said, like it doesn't matter, it needs to come out. It's gonna have to come out anyway.
It's better to find out if there's any issues then than when you actually own the
Right.
property.
Because again, when you sign, now it becomes your problem. So that's another, and the money that you're gonna spend for these inspections is well worth it. Because you may put out, you know, all in all, $700-800, but you'd rather lose $700-800 than, you know, $400,000 on a house that you're stuck with.
And so just go back to your question as far as the fees that you would pay up front, not at the closing. So for us, the only fee that you're paying up front is the appraisal. And you're paying that once they go out to do the appraisal. Typically speaking, the appraisal fee is $4.99 for a single family home. Okay, you can put it on the credit card. Our fee you would only pay if and when you close. Okay. The other fees that you would pay up front is something like your homeowner's insurance. That would be about 2 weeks or so before closing. Okay, you can also put that on a credit card or something if you wanted to. And you would pay a year of homeowner's insurance up front, okay, before closing, so that you would be covered for a full year. All right. Survey would be another.
Right, so survey is usually about $750. What we do though, at the start of the process, when we do the attorney review, I always ask for back title, meaning the deed, the prior title insurance policy, and if they have a survey. If it's a recent survey, I don't know what Bond Street policy is, but certain banks will accept a recent survey with what's called an affidavit of no change by the seller saying there's been no changes to anything that's on this survey. And you may be able to save $750 that way.
Yeah. And we do accept that. But does everybody understand what a survey is?
It's basically a drawing of the property by meets and bounds. So basically, a surveyor will go out there and do measurements to make sure, you know, that everything's within the property line. If there's a fence, see if the fence is within. So they basically mark out the property. Most people want just the drawing. You can also, for an extra cost, usually it's about $125 a stake, you can have permanent markers put it. And you may want to do that if you're going to be doing any type of construction on the house that we're on, putting in a fence, you know, you're going to need to have permanent markers put it.
It's also important to know, I believe, right, because if a seller or a neighbor had put something on the property that was, you know, impeaching on your property, and it's there for a certain amount of time, you actually can ask them to move it. So it's important to know that. It's 20 years.
It's 30 years before someone has what's called an adverse possession.
Did you say 7 years? How is that again?
No, it's-
You could ask them or not?
But if it's there for more than 30 years,
Right.
then they may have actually rights to keep whatever that encroachment is on your property.
If you never said anything. something
Right,
like that.
exactly. So you want to make sure when you're buying a property that there's no encroachments. Around here, you'll find sometimes there is. There might be a minor, you know, encroachment, a foot, less than a foot of a fence being either over your property line or on your neighbor's property. Those are typically not big deals because somebody tells you, okay, we need to move it, your encroachment, you'll move it. Otherwise, you just leave it. You know, some people are more territorial than others, but it really depends on what the encroachment is.
I've been doing this 13 years. I've never come across a problem until recently where the neighbor behind my buyer, I represent buyer, so the seller had purchased the property behind him from the neighbor like 10 years ago. And it has a beautiful built-in pool on the property. So when we did the title search, it came back that that pool is right on the middle of the property because they never filed the deed, and the person behind them still owns that property. So now they have half a pool that's on somebody else's property and it's built in. So we're going through that right now. So Yeah, things can
So
come
that's
up.
important to
A
get.
little bigger than a fence. Part of the rule.
How do you
Yes.
deal with when a house has a driveway that's shared by two houses?
Yeah, that's rare. I mean, that happens.
I've come
More in
across so
South
many.
Bergen.
I can't even tell
But
you.
yes, there's usually a driveway easement that's on file that says you can't block the driveway. It's a mutual access to a garage, or garage is in the back,
Oh, okay.
and it's an agreement of record.
A lot of times, I don't know if you know Richfield Park, Pagoda, because the homes are closer together. A lot of times they have the one driveway coming in and then, you know, the garages are set in.
I came across some that were so close and ridiculous. Literally, the garage is right there. Like, I actually walked back and there, you could just walk a little bit. The garage is right close to the house. I said, what is this?
And that's usually listed on the listing sheet that you will see, off the New Jersey MLS. It'll state that there's an easement on the property. Sure.
I'd like to add something about home inspection process. When you go to buy the house, sometimes you can sit down and negotiate. You may not have to negotiate with the buyer, who has a pest control company come annually or biannually to take care of rodents and insects. And sometimes that is transferable without any cost. So maybe the pest control company wants your business, so they'll gladly transfer it to your name when you buy the house. Not all cases, but it's happened.
And two other things that are pretty big in the process that I want to touch on, that we spoke about really briefly, was the appraisal. So the appraisal is important, and it's different than the inspection. Some people believe it's the same thing, but it's not. So we're having a third party come out and verify the worth of the property. They're going out, they're looking at comparable houses in the area that are just sold, to make sure that they're coming up with the value that the property that you're buying is worth however much you're paying for it. Now, if the appraisal comes in higher, that's just a benefit to you. You can't use that extra equity in the property as down payment. Okay. If it comes in lower, then we have discussions about what type of options we have available to us. A lot of times, you know, the realtors know what they're doing, and it comes in a value, you know, actually being purchased for. Okay, but that's going to be a report that you're going to get, and you'll see the different properties in the area that are being compared to your property. The only other thing that we touched on real quick is title insurance. Does anybody know what title insurance is? Okay. Joe, I don't know if you want to talk about
The
it.
title insurance is what it sounds like. It's ensuring that you have title to the property, that no one else has any claim to it, that there are no prior owner judgments. Okay, so one of the things that a title policy does is check to see down the chain of title if anyone had any judgments against them that may cause a lien to be placed on the property. In New Jersey, there's a law that you can record a judgment, docket the judgment, and becomes a lien upon real estate. One of the good things about having a prior owner's policy from the seller is they'll ensure that there's no other liens out there that may show up, a judgment against a prior owner somewhere down the line that may be a lien on title. So if you have that prior owner's policy from the seller, your policy will cover you going forward, and you're covered by their policy going back. So it's a one-time premium. It's not like homeowner insurance where you pay every year. You pay the premium one time, run the searches, make sure there's no liens and no encumbrances, there's nothing out there that you need to worry about. It's required by the bank.
There's a question on Facebook, and Patricia is asking, can anyone talk to the transfer of flood insurance policies?
Yeah.
Mentioned flood insurance. That's another thing the title search will come up with. A lot of times.
And the lender will also.
Right, I'm sorry, yeah. FEMA sometimes can change the, how do I put it, the bound of where,
Right.
Yeah.
The flood maps have
Maps.
changed. My understanding is that you're not allowed to transfer flood policy. You have to get new flood insurance. You can't just say, seller has a policy, I want to take that over, because of the new regulations under FEMA. It's changed, so maybe they have their own policy. I've had situations actually where a prior, the seller says, no, I just have this policy, but the house is not in the flood zone. And it's cheap. It's only a couple $100 or whatever. And then when the buyer goes to see how much the flood insurance is, they find out, well, it's significantly higher because the flood maps have changed. So you have to be careful.
Yeah, and that's the key to being able to transfer the policy. If the flood zone is the same as the current policy, you can sometimes get it transferred in that case. But FEMA has been very diligent, especially since Irene and then Sandy, updating the flood maps and changing the zones, really making them higher risk. So it's very rare that you'll be able to transfer those policies, and you have to get a new policy in the new zone. You can sometimes save money by doing what's called an elevation certificate. So if the property is above the flood line, you can pay, it's typically in the $500 range to get what's called an elevation certificate done, submit that to an insurance company to get a reduced rate on insurance.
That's done by the survey.
And that's done by the surveyor, yes.
A lot of the elevations, see how high above the flood wall.
So another question was how am I protected as a buyer under the contract? And New Jersey not being necessarily an attorney state, but why do you recommend to use an attorney in a real estate transaction?
Well, Northern Bergen County, Northern New Jersey, people use attorneys. That's just typical way it's done. South Jersey, they sometimes use the title companies. I think the cutoff line I've seen is like LBI. Like LBI, they use attorneys. Past LBI, they don't. It's important because, it's an important investment. So your title company is not going to negotiate the inspection issues. They're going to insure your title, but the inspection issues are on you. So that's why you need to have an attorney to protect your interests there. If there's something that comes up during the contract, there's an allegation that there's a breach or something, you need to have an attorney at that point anyway. From my point of view, it's well worth the amount that you're spending for an attorney to make sure you're protected throughout the process.
Again, it's the biggest investment somebody is going to make. To not have an attorney is crazy. Anything can happen. Even, I'll take a 2-family house, for example. What happens if you have a tenant that doesn't want to get out and you have no attorney? Like Joe said, you're going to have to hire one. So it really, it's something I insist you must have.
So what specifically in the contract protects a buyer? What contingencies?
Well, you have an inspection contingency. It's usually the first thing that I look at to make sure that that's in there, that it's covering any aspect of an inspection. Look at the inspection and you say, there's a problem here, and the seller says, no, I don't want to take care of it. You have a right to get your deposit back. Now, it can't be cosmetic things, but it has to be mechanical, physical defects, those types of things. So I make sure that the language in there protects you for that. That's usually the biggest contingency in the contract, other than the mortgage contingency. So the second part of what I put in what's called a rider to the contract, that's part of the attorney review, is to make sure there's language in there that says, if for any reason I don't get my mortgage beyond things that are beyond my control, I get the right to say, look, I can't buy this property and I'm going to get out of the contract. Of course, it could be something where you haven't given your mortgage company, your bank, proper documentation. They say, because you haven't provided the proper documentation, you can't give this loan. But it could be anything. It could be a change of employment, for the death or an illness or something that's changed. And although you have a pre-approval, at the end of the day, you're not able to get the mortgage. The appraisal, that's a typical thing. It's happening, unfortunately, more and more because prices are going up. And what you see now is that people who are buying houses, sometimes they're buying it above what the appraised value is going to be because the comparables are from several months ago where the prices were lower. So if you can't get your mortgage or you can't put more money down because of that change in the value, you have to have a right to get out of the contract. So I usually put a provision that says unless it appraises for the amount that I'm going for or the amount of the purchase price, you have a right to get out of the contract.
And we have something right now going with that.
Yes.
With that clause
Right.
in there. Another thing I just wanted to mention, we scanned a bunch of contracts, your standard buyer contracts, everything that's going to be signed when you go to put an offer in on a house. Is there a link we can send then-
Yep, we'll have a link that we're going to post, and that'll have a copy of what a standard contract looks like and some of the information that was given out today.
One other thing that's important to have, if we can get it, is the seller's disclosure. That's something that's generated by the seller's realtor, who will provide a disclosure statement. Now, it's helpful. It's not something that you have to look at and say, okay, I can rely upon that absolutely. But it may tell you how old the roof is, how old the furnace is, whether there's been any improvements done, those types of things. So, you can think that.
And that's also in that package as well. You can review that.
Going back into what you were saying before, are you protected like in a case if it's a two-family house and you move it in and somebody's renting the first floor and they don't want to get out? So what happens in that case? You don't want them there.
Okay, so that's a very interesting thing that happens. Under the law, tenants have the rights under their lease to stay in that house for as long as their lease allows them to. So typically you have a yearly lease.
Even if they're not paying rent.
If they're not paying rent, then the seller is responsible to get them out by way of an eviction action for non-payment of rent. So we have to be aware of that. The other thing is this. There's a provision in the law that says if you as a buyer wish to occupy their unit or yourself, that's a basis to get someone out of the property. However, again, it's subject to their lease. So let's say you have a month-to-month tenant, right? So they're just on a month-to-month basis. You as the buyer say, no, I want to occupy that unit, you need to get them out. Well, you have to put that in the contract in my rider that says you seller have to provide me adequate notice so that when we close, it's empty. Now, people don't realize this, but even on a month-to-month tenancy, the notice is 2 months. And it's not 60 days, it's 2 full months. So let's say you give notice to a tenant on May 1st, and you want them to get out May, June, you say the end of June. May 1st is May. Now you've got to go 2 full months. You're looking at the end of July. Had you done it on April 30th, then you could say, okay, May, June, I want you out at the end of June. But you give them the notice on May 1st, July. And people don't realize that. So, gotta be careful.
I actually seen a two-family house that said, it was listed and said, in other words, if you want to buy the house, you have to get rid of the tenants.
Well, yeah, you could agree to do that. You could agree to say you're going to take over as the landlord of that.
So, but doesn't that say that they can't get rid of them?
That probably does. And it's interesting because the law does say that you as the owner want to occupy that unit. Now, that doesn't say, a neighbor, a family member, somebody else, so you want to get a new tenant in there. It means you. So you have to actually say, yes, I intend to occupy that unit.
I do have more questions. This for the home inspection. You mentioned that you obviously inspect the property. Can you just briefly hit on what the major components major issues of the home that you would look at for during a home inspection? I know every home is different, but just a general idea of what you're looking at in the home inspection.
Components would be the electrical system, heater, the hot water heater, furnace if there's a furnace, air conditioning unit, the air handler in the attic, the roof, meaning the shingles and the roof below that in the attic. Insulation is the big one, and also mold and insects are the biggest ones. Minor things like cosmetic things are the paint chips in the wall, or paint chip off the woodwork, or a piece of wood missing off of the window. It's minor, considered cosmetic.
Okay. This is for Kelly. Earlier, one of the slides mentioned buyers agents and listing agents. What is the difference?
Let me go back to my team first. Myself and my business partner we're buyer's agents and listing agents. We have a team and we have 2 buyer's agents that work with us. So there's 4 of us. A buyer's agent is exactly what it says it is. They represent you as the buyer. Seller's agent represents the seller. There is what's called a dual agent. And a dual agent, if the seller gives permission, can represent both sides. So if I was listing the property and you came in and wanted to purchase it and you didn't have a realtor, I would be a disclosed dual agent. You would know as the buyer that I'm representing two sides, and so would the seller. I don't like how that works because I find it's very difficult to represent two sides equally, hence the reason we put the team together. So if I'm listing a property and a buyer calls on our listing, I'm going to pass you off to my buyer's agent, because if it's a house that you're interested in, I want her to represent you 100%, that you have somebody that's working on your behalf, and I would work on the seller's behalf. I just think in this day and age, it just gets kind of muddied when you have one person working on both sides. So that's how we handle it. And that's how my team got formed, for reasons of that.
This one is for Vince, Patricia on Facebook again. Prior to getting approved, do you have a means to guide a buyer in how to clean up their credit?
We do have a means for that. We review the credit, and there's a couple of different things that we could do. We actually have in-house consulting and what's called rapid rescore, I guess we'd call it. And we would see if you qualify for something like that. So depending on what's showing up on the credit report, whether it be high balances on cards that could be paid down, you can get those credit scores updated within 3 to 5 business days by doing that. If it's a drastic situation, let's say there's collection accounts, things that need to be taken off of the credit report, we do have a credit reporting credit agency that we work with that we can refer you to do that extra work. So we're reviewing it at all times. Even if, let's say, you have a high 600 credit score, we could see something that can get paid down to 0 and raise that score to elevate you into a level that's going to give you a better interest rate. We're going to discuss that with you. Doing it with us in-house is actually no charge for that, and the process again is only 3 to 5 business days. Okay.
And then I guess this is the last question, general question. Every transaction is different, I know that, but in general, how long does the whole process take?
In reality, I'm going to say 60 to 90, really more closer to 90 days. There are people that say they can close in 30 to 45 days, and I'm sure it can happen. But the whole process, I would say 60 to be safe, but really more realistically.
Yeah,
How do you feel?
Optimal 60, but sometimes it's a little long.
Yeah, and you want to make sure it's not too stressful for yourself. There's a lot of components to this, a lot of things that you're going back and forth and negotiating with the sellers with. And so you want that time, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself and say, oh my God, I have to go through 30 days. Because you're living your normal life, going to work to make sure you can pay for this mortgage. So we try to hit whatever dates are in the contract for, the clients, either the selling side or buying side. But generally speaking, it is 60 to 90.
Usually 30 days to get a mortgage, unless it's FHA or VA, sometimes they add another 15 days for that. So that's, and then that's for the underwriting and all of that. And so 60 days is optimal, but somewhere between 60 and
Remember this, buying this house and writing that check is probably the largest check you'll ever write. It's the biggest purchase, so you don't want to rush through it.
Any other questions for Facebook? So I just want to go over some do's and don'ts during the process that we just advise you guys. Some don'ts is, don't drive up those balances on your credit cards, because that can affect your credit scores. Don't close out any accounts on your credit, any accounts, because they can lower your credit scores as well. Okay, if that shows up on the credit report. Keep all of your pay stubs readily available and bank statements, because we will need to update them. Try not to change jobs, or let us know if you're going to be changing jobs, because that's going to affect things during the process. We need to see 4 pay stubs from the new employer. We need to make sure it's going to be in the same line of work. So we want to know that stuff up front. Try not to put any cash deposits into the bank. Okay, so if you actually have cash and it can't be traceable, that becomes an issue as well.
How much are you talking about? Is it a lot of money or a small amount?
Well, it depends on really what you get. So it depends on what you get paid. So it's not a set number, but if you're getting paid $1,000 a month, they want to see a
So
certain
like, my point
percentage.
is, my uncle gives me like $2,000 to $3,000, but he doesn't want anybody to know. Now I can't I have no
You
way
can.
of, it's not a check, he's giving me cash, what do I do?
So if it's a check, it's okay.
It's not a check, that's
If it's
my
not a
point,
check,
he's
so
giving
if-
me cash.
so if he
now
gave you
what?
cash.
I can't use it?
So, well, you can't really use it for a down payment depending on, or for the proceeds of the sale. Okay, it needs to be traced basically. So if you have enough in your account, we could sometimes back it out. It really goes case by case in a sense to say, if we need to use that money for this transaction or not. If we can say, go ahead.
So for every mortgage transaction, you're required to provide 2 months of bank statements. So if you're getting a gift from a family member, and unfortunately, the process of getting a mortgage today is a little bit intrusive. We will admit that, and that really is about regulations. It's not like the old days, kind of do things on a handshake and, get what you need from your banker because you're creditworthy and trustworthy. I would recommend that if you are going to start looking for a house, to get that money in the bank right away. That way, when you present your bank statements, that
It's
cash
already there.
deposit's not on that statement. It's already in there. And it's crazy that we have to say that, but that's the world we live in, that cash is a bad thing today.
Keep that money your uncle gave you, remodel that bathroom.
Right.
So I don't know if you guys have any views on those.
I would say, in a market right now where there are multiple offers on properties, buyers are trying to just let go of things. To get the house, they'll turn around and say, no, I'll waive my home inspection. I won't do a home inspection. I'll take the house as is. It gives me a heart attack when I hear somebody say that. Yeah, and Joe will make you put it in writing. So I really would not give up any of your rights as far as a buyer.
Kelly, another question from Facebook, Patricia, thank you. What is the greatest obstacle to buying or trying to buy a short sale?
Time. It's a lot of time, and people don't understand you're dealing with a business, not a person, and it's hard.
Yeah,
right?
and it's out of your control
Right.
to a large extent. It's really on the seller to get the approval of the bank for the short sale. It's somewhat easier when there's one bank, but some people have a bank and then a home equity, and it becomes difficult. It could take up to a year, to get the approval for a short sale.
And it's very frustrating and very stressful.
Does it ever not take a long time? Because everyone I've spoken
It can. I
to
mean,
says it
I've
takes a
had-
long
I've
time,
had-
regardless, stay
I've
away
had
from them.
them where it's taken less time because it's been already taking a long time, and we're at the end of the process, and the prior buyer had said, I'm done, I can't do it. And then somebody else steps in and says, I'm ready, and they're at the end of the process, so we can close pretty quickly.
As long as it's the same amount, right?
Right, yeah. It's like a moving target to a certain extent, because what happens is, the short sale bank will say, okay, here's the number, but you gotta close within 10 days or something crazy like that. And then, okay, now you got to get all your ducks in a row. It's difficult.
And Patricia, you mean short sale, not foreclosed property, correct?
Yes, the question was specific short
Okay,
sale.
short sale.
Yes.
If somebody is in like for example, a car sale, is it harder for someone that's a car seller, which is primarily the commission fee, to get approved for a mortgage, as opposed to someone who makes, I guess, hourly or salary?
It's not harder, but we're averaging out the income over the last 2 years. So it depends on what you made in, let's say, 15 and 16. Compared to somebody who's salaried, we can use whatever their income is as of right now. So if they've gotten a raise over the last 2 years, we can use that. Where we are averaging it over 2 years for someone who's commission. Same thing applies for bonus and overtime, things like that.
So, it's gonna hurt you if 1 year you made 100 grand, and then the market went and now you made 55, 60.
Exactly. If it's going the opposite way and not increasing and we actually decrease, they're going to go off a worst case scenario and use the lower number. So if it's progressively getting higher, they will average it out. But in that situation, like I said, they're going to use the lower number. So, benefit to me. And one other do's and don'ts that I just wanted to talk about was increase on the credit report. So once you're going to apply for a mortgage, I don't have your credit pulled for anything else, credit cards, a new car, things like that. That can lower the credit scores because they're going to look at it as you purchasing multiple different things, and that can reflect negatively on the credit score.
What about, in closing, and that whole, if I just purchased a house and the same month I go purchase a car? Or is that a myth, like, cause I'm sorry, I'm a car salesman. I tell people all the time, wait till closing, or you 100% get in the house, then you can come, cause it doesn't show that you have the house yet. So is it one of those, like, I can wait to that same month, we almost got the house and I can get a car, or do I have to wait till everything's completely done before I go purchase something?
Wait until everything's completely done. Because we do a refresh, it's called, at the end of the process, right before closing, just like we verify somebody's employment within 10 days of closing to see if anything coming up on that. So not so much as far as the score is going down, but more as what's this payment, it doesn't affect you qualifying for a mortgage now. It can actually, hurt you. And going back to even Joe, depending on the seller, they can actually, I guess possibly try to keep your deposit money in escrow, which you don't want to, which you want to try to avoid. So we always say, don't go for that.
You live in the car.
Right, you might want to.
We mentioned communication before. When I'm dealing with my buyers, I'm talking to you every day. And I'm always saying, Ada will tell you, remember, don't make any big purchases. Remember, don't forget to call, your mortgage broker before you do this. Or if you come to me and ask me a question, I'm like, listen, you need to check with, things first before you do anything. Because you just don't want to do anything that could jeopardize the closing.
Could I ask for more money, like if I'm buying a house and I'm going for a mortgage, can I get asked for more money than I really need for the closing that I could possibly use for anything else? Not necessarily prepared, but so if it's a house and it's like 400,000, but I want 450,000, can I ask for more money that, or does the mortgage only be to cover the house unless I'm more specific repairs?
So it has to be for specific repairs if you're going to add money to the loan amount of the property. But what we do is we go over different ways of doing it. So, there's programs that allow as little as, let's say, 3 or 3.5% down. Now, if you were planning to put down, let's say, 20%, my advice would be that you put down this money on the property and use that additional money that you have to go and do whatever repairs or whatever you need to do on the property. That's how you would get to that point. If you were planning to put the minimum down on a property, that's a little different story. You can always go, there's different things. We have no closing cost programs. There's also something called a seller's concession. So when making an offer on a property, you can go and ask the seller to actually pay for closing costs. So let's just take the $400,000 example. You put an offer in at $400,000 with a $10,000 seller concession. That's going to mean that the seller is going to walk away with $390,000, and you're going to have $10,000 to go towards your closing costs. So it doesn't open up the full amount that you offer. It does open up a portion of that. Okay. So different things like that is what we're going to do to structure it correctly. Okay.
Not to throw a wrench into things, but when you do that sometimes, the house needs to appraise out. So if you're adding that $10,000, you want to make sure that the house is going to appraise, because if it doesn't appraise, then you're going to have to drop that concession.
You can't raise up, once you come up with the purchase price of the property, you can't say, okay, well, I want to add $10,000. It has to be.
You also have to be careful when you do that, and then you ask for a concession on the inspection. If that's high, and you're adding that to the seller's concession, that sometimes causes an issue.
Right, correct. Because what happens is, let's say you go for a $10,000 seller's concession, and closing costs, comes to about $12,000. Okay, and now you have an inspection done, and you want $5,000 in repairs. Typically speaking, you're going to ask for that concession to go towards your closing costs. So now you have $15,000. If closing cost comes to $12,000, you lose that other $3,000. You're not put that towards anything else. So you want to be, we want to be strategic with that. If that's a situation where you thought, we'll talk to Kelly and the inspector and said, hey, do you think that there's, considerable amount that we're going to ask for back on the credit? Maybe we only ask for $5,000 sales concession. Okay, so that we have that legal. Okay. Any other questions from you guys?
For you, this last one,
Yeah, sure.
FHA and versus home ready. So on the bottom says no borrower education required, and the other side says borrower education required? What does that mean exactly?
So some programs require that you take a class to fully
Ah.
understand the product that you're going to be getting yourself into. We explain it as thorough as possible to make sure that you feel comfortable with it. You understand the program, but they do require the second level. You just take that class. It could be online, you go somewhere to do it, just to make sure you fully understand.
Part of your loan application package will contain 10 local counseling agencies based on your present address. So where you live now, it's a 4-page document. It'll list 10 counseling agencies in your area. As a first-time home buyer, we recommend that you do take that. Like Vince said, he will sit down and go through the costs and the programs and educate you on the mortgage that way. But it is a very big investment, and it's a lot of these things you can do online and just to inform yourself and educate yourself on the whole process as well.
So I think we just want to go through some common questions that were asked from clients that might spark, something in your mind. So one of the biggest things is closing costs for us. They asked us, where in general closing costs are going to end. In this area, I would say in a price range of, let's say, up to 500,000, you're going to be, generally speaking, $10,000 to $15,000 in closing costs. Somewhere in that general. Okay, that's including your escrows for taxes and insurance as well. So they're going to take anywhere from 4 to 6 months of taxes, depending on when you're closing. Okay. Another common question that we get is about PMI and mortgage insurance. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about that. Okay. So mortgage insurance is basically something that you're going to need to pay in some form or fashion if you're not putting down 20% on the property. Okay. And what that mortgage insurance is doing is just ensuring the lender that if you were to ever default on the property, that they're getting a portion back, of that money, so that they can go off a short sale or foreclosure or something along those lines. So those are some common questions that we get into lender. Programs, 30-year fixed, is the most common program that we have. We also have ARM programs with adjustable rate mortgages that have an interest rate that's fixed for a shorter amount of time, but does yield a lower interest rate. We go through these products to make sure that they're something that makes sense for your situation. Okay, we don't go with the 5-year just because it's a lower rate and you can qualify for a larger property. We're doing this because of the specific type of transaction that, hey, listen, we're not going to be in this property more than 3 years. Like that, we'll give you all these options to say, listen, this might be something that makes sense. Okay.
They're not such questions, but the biggest thing I get, and I mentioned it earlier, is Zillow said, and Zillow has this, and Zillow has that, and Zillow is great as a guide, just like WebMD is good as a guide, but it's best to work with a realtor who knows the market, who's going out and previewing these homes, knows the neighborhoods, knows the school systems, knows what areas, walking distance to transportation, knows the train lines. Just make sure you're working with somebody who does it full time, who's going to advocate for you and knows the business.
Yeah, I mean, those are the questions, same questions that Kelly gets, I get. Well, questions I usually get are, okay, home inspection, who should I use? And I usually give them a list of 3 falls on that list. What type of inspections, tank scan. I usually ask more questions than I'm asked because I sort of know the process a little bit more. If you're not asking questions, I'll raise the issues for you. So things that you need to be careful of.
Can you buy a foreclosure if it's in foreclosure? I was told that if it's in pre-foreclosure, it could be stopped, but if it's in foreclosure, you can't.
Not necessarily.
No.
No. You could get approval from the bank to pay off the loan. The seller does. They're able to do it. Banks are happy
Is
to
it
have
like a
you-
short sale then?
Yes, typically, being in foreclosure means that there's a shortage, and otherwise they're able to make payments. So yeah, it's typically the situation.
Well, what about when the bank takes back the house and they're already out of it? I think, is that what you're talking about? When nobody's living there and it's vacant?
No, like I see, It was actually a real estate agent that had told me that. She said, I said, I'm looking at these couple of houses, you know, and she said, well, I'm going to tell you, if it's pre-foreclosure, I can stop it. She said, if it's not, don't even bother to look at
You
it.
can't stop foreclosure, but you can
But I can put a bid on it.
put a bid
foreclosure.
on it, it's subject to them approving the sale. The bank doesn't want the house necessarily, they want their money.
course.
So if you're able to pay off the loan that you get, they're happy to do that. A bank-owned property is different. Now that's already done, the foreclosure process is over. The bank now owns the property and they want to get rid of
It's
it.
usually easier to get that way, isn't it?
Yes.
Right? Because
The
they
bank
don't want
wants
to hold on
get
to
rid
it.
of Right, the bank wants to get rid of the property.
The only downside to that, and I tell all buyers, beware, you have no history on that house whatsoever. You know nothing about it. And as a first-time home buyer, you know, going into a home that you have no history on, you don't know if it floods, you don't know if they're, you know, you have nothing,
And they're not going to do anything.
and they're not doing anything.
The bank's not going to put any more money in it.
Nothing.
So there's problems, there's no problems.
I would rather you get something smaller, you know, and a little bit more fixed up than deal with the bank.
As far as home inspectors are concerned, it's an interesting point. Home inspectors, like realtors, we have CEUs, continuing education units, that we must meet on a quarterly basis or monthly basis, some of us. So an interesting question you want to ask your home inspector, are they compliant? So that means, are they licensed? Is their license up to date? Are they compliant with their education units? So if they're not, that could be a problem later on in the future. It may not be, but it could be. Interesting. You ask them if they belong to any kind of organization, like the New Jersey Association of Certified Home Inspectors or American Certified Home Inspectors, some kind of an organization where they go through these education units. Continually learning about home inspections. A lot of the home inspectors out there are not doing that. Questions for that?
I would also say, like, 5 years ago, radon wasn't something we ever talked about. You know, 10 years ago, the tanks were allowed to stay in the ground. Everything changes so often, and it's nice to be able to have somebody who's up to date on, you know, the new issues, the new problems that are coming up.
Any questions about radon? Does anyone know what radon is?
I was wondering what she was talking about. I'm sorry.
Radon is a gas made by Mother Nature. It's all over the world. And it's what the tourists would like to get their hands on, because from the radon, they get polonium out of that and explosive. It's crazy. But it's an invisible gas. You can't smell it, taste it, or see it, or hear it, or anything. And we're always breathing the alpha particles. When radon comes up from the earth, it starts a decaying process. And it breaks into particles. And the particles that we breathe that are poisonous are called the alpha particles. They adhere to the lungs. In this country, in the past 10 years, approximately 25,000 people have died from lung poisoning from radon. It's the second leading cause of lung cancer in this country. The EPA suggests that every house be checked for radon before you buy it. You don't have to. It's not a law. You're not forced to do that. But it's recommended that you do. When the radon test comes back and it's higher than 4.0 picocuries, the EPA requests or wants you to mitigate that. That means a separate company will come in and they'll drill a little hole in the floor, put a pipe and attach a motor so it pulls all those fumes out of the basement floor and it's not affected. That makes the house safe.
But every house has some level of radon.
Every house has some level, and radon is more concentrated in around the Rocky Mountains areas like in Passaic County, some in Bergen County. Southern Jersey, where the sandy areas, radon escapes easier and quicker, so it's not as much as a problem.
So if you buy a house that's been closed up for a long
Right.
time, hasn't been occupied, nobody's opening and closing the doors, you might get a higher level of radon in your home that it's regularly occupied.
How do you get rid of it?
By mitigating it, there's companies out there who will come in and by mitigating it, it means they just find pathways to eliminate it so that it evacuates through a pipe, gets pulled out from under the slab of the concrete floor where it's heavily concentrated and it blows it out through the top over the house away from your breathing area. And
It's a fan
It's
system.
fancy.
It's a fan operated system.
And I want to add too, with that, when people hear they have a radon system in their house, or they have French drains and a sump pump, like, oh my God, I don't want, you're better off having those things than not having them. Because somebody who has a radon system, you have virtually zero radon in your house, where somebody could have 0.3 picocuries, and you're right on the cusp. So those things are not bad things to have in a house.
Yes, any other questions?
Learn more about radon.
No questions from Facebook Live?
Nope, we're done.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time, guys. Thank you very much.
You know, we're gonna be here, you know, if you have questions, you wanna come up, feel like asking them out in the open.
Yeah,
We're here, we'll be here for, you know, a while, so please.
I do have a question for you. What if you don't agree with if someone wants to put a bid on a house and you don't agree with that, the amount they want to put down?
You have to present the offer.
You have to.
Absolutely.
And it's
Absolutely.
because one of the girls that I work with, she was working with someone and she put a bid, or she thought she put a bid on a house, but she was told later by someone else that they never actually put the bid in.
Yeah, that's illegal.
But she had no proof, so either way, she didn't know if it was really done or not. I mean, is there something that can you show?
You can have a seller sign the contract, like if you submit an offer
Mhm.
and it's rejected, I would ask the seller to sign the bottom of the contract, just that they received it. But they have 24 hours, right, to present a contract all the time. Technically, even if it's a verbal, do they? But yeah, absolutely. I mean, realtors may not want to put $150,000 bid in on a $300,000 house, but nonetheless, if they want you to write it up, you have to do it.
great. And we also just want to let you guys know that we're going to be doing this, hopefully on a monthly basis. So please, check out the Facebook page. We're going to post when we're going to be doing this again. We'd love to see you guys back here. If you have any questions, feel free to send them over to us beforehand. And if you know anybody else who's looking to purchase and could benefit from this, please, let them know. We'd love to have them here.
You have all our information, I believe. Did you bring cards? Okay, good. We'll give you Joe and Paul's cards as well. Email, call us. We're happy to help.
Yeah.
And no question is a silly question. I
Yeah.
forget you said that. It's overwhelming.
I have a lot.
Now we're going to take the test. Are you guys ready for the test?
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you guys so much.
Thank you.
Oh my God, it was freezing.